Detective Ryan Cole had been with the police department for 12 years, and he'd built something most officers only dream about: a reputation. The kind where prosecutors smiled when they saw his name on a case file. The kind where his captain trusted him to close the difficult ones. The kind that made him feel like he was doing something that mattered in a world that often felt broken. On a cold Tuesday morning in November, Ryan walked into the precinct with his usual coffee and found a new case waiting on his desk. Armed robbery at a corner store on 5th Street. One clerk injured, $300 taken, and a gun involved. It should have been routine. Just another case in a city full of them. But this one would change everything, though Ryan didn't know it yet. The surveillance footage was terrible. The camera system was old, the kind that business owners install and forget about until something happens. The video showed a figure in a dark hoodie, face mostly hidden, moving quickly through the store. You could make out the general build, the height maybe, but the details were lost in the grainy black and white pixels. The timestamp showed 11:15 at night. Ryan watched the footage 6 times that first day. He had a gut feeling about it. That instinct cops talk about. The thing that supposedly separates good detectives from great ones. He felt certain this wasn't some random crime. There was something about the way the suspect moved, the confidence in the gestures. This person had done this before. The store owner, Mr. Patel, was shaken but cooperative. He'd been hit on the back of the head and couldn't remember much. Young guy, he said, maybe 17, 18, African-American, tall, thin build, dark clothes. That was about all he could manage. His hands shook as he gave his statement, and Ryan felt that familiar anger rising in his chest. The anger that came from seeing good people hurt by criminals who didn't care. 2 days later, a break in the case came from an unexpected source. A woman called the tip line. She didn't want to give her name, but she had information. She'd seen someone running from that direction around the time of the robbery. A young man she recognized from the neighborhood. His name was Devin Mitchell, 17 years old, lived 3 blocks from the store. Ryan pulled Devin's record. 1 prior offense, shoplifting when he was 15. A candy bar and a soda from a gas station. Not exactly a violent criminal, but Ryan had seen it before. Small crimes leading to bigger ones. The pattern was predictable, almost textbook. When they brought Devin in for questioning, Ryan was already convinced. The kid fit the description. The height was right, the build matched. He lived in the area and had a record, even if it was minor. Everything pointed in one direction, and Ryan's instinct was screaming that they had their guy. Devin sat in the interrogation room looking terrified. He was thin, probably hadn't eaten well in days. His clothes were clean but worn, the kind of worn that comes from being washed too many times. His mother sat beside him, a woman who looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than just being tired. She worked 2 jobs, Ryan learned later, a fact that would come back to haunt him. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. Devin kept saying the same thing over and over. He wasn't there. He was at the youth center that night playing basketball with friends until midnight. He gave names, times, details. But Ryan had heard it all before. Every guilty person had an alibi. Every criminal had a story. Ryan pressed harder. He laid out the evidence, such as it was. The surveillance footage, even though you couldn't really make out a face. The witness statement, though it was vague. The proximity to the crime scene. The prior record. Ryan was good at this part. He knew how to build pressure, how to make someone feel like the walls were closing in. He'd gotten confessions before using these same techniques. Devin's mother kept interrupting, insisting her son was a good boy. He was trying to graduate, she said. He wanted to go to community college. He'd learned from his mistake with the shoplifting. Ryan had heard this too, countless times. Every mother thought her son was innocent. It was natural, understandable even, but it didn't change the facts. The public defender who showed up was young, maybe 2 years out of law school. She looked overwhelmed before she even sat down. Ryan could see she was carrying a briefcase full of other cases, other clients who needed her attention. She asked for a few minutes with Devin and his mother, then came back looking even more tired. They didn't arrest Devin that day, but Ryan was building his case. He went back to the neighborhood, talked to people. A few said they'd seen Devin around that night, though no one could say exactly where or when. One elderly man said he saw someone who might have been Devin running down the street around 11:30. When Ryan asked if he was sure, the man hesitated, then nodded. Ryan took that as confirmation. The thing about building a case is that once you start, every piece of evidence seems to fit the picture you're creating. Ryan found himself dismissing the things that didn't match. Devon's claim about the youth center? Those places didn't keep good records and his friends might be covering for him. The fact that no physical evidence tied Devon to the scene? That just meant he was careful. The gut feeling Ryan had wasn't just strong anymore. It was certainty. 3 weeks after the robbery, Devon was arrested and charged. Ryan watched as they put the handcuffs on him in his own home, his mother screaming in the background that they were wrong, that her boy was innocent. Devon didn't fight. He just looked at Ryan with tears running down his face and said, "I didn't do this. Please, you have to believe me." Ryan looked away. He'd heard those words before, too. The trial came 3 months later. The evidence was circumstantial, but Ryan's testimony was confident. He'd worked the case thoroughly, he told the jury. Every lead had been followed. The defendant had opportunity, a record, and no solid alibi. The surveillance footage, enhanced as much as possible by their tech team, was shown to the jury. The witness testimonies, shaky as they were, all pointed in one direction. Devon's lawyer tried her best, but she was outmatched and everyone in the courtroom knew it. She brought up the youth center alibi but couldn't produce concrete proof. She questioned the identification, but couldn't shake the cumulative weight of Ryan's investigation. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was guilty on all counts. Ryan sat in the courtroom and felt that familiar satisfaction. Justice served. Another case closed. Another dangerous person off the streets. As the judge read the sentence, 15 years with possibility of parole after 8, Devon's mother let out a sound Ryan would never forget. Not a scream exactly, but something deeper, more primal. She collapsed in her seat and someone had to help her out of the courtroom. Devon just stood there, tears streaming down his face, staring at Ryan with an expression of complete betrayal. That night, Ryan went home to his apartment. He made dinner, watched television, and went to bed feeling like he'd done his job well. He'd protected his community. He'd gotten a criminal off the streets. His conviction record remained perfect. He slept soundly, never imagining that 6 years later, everything he believed about that case, about himself, and about justice would come crashing down around him in the most devastating way possible. 6 years passed like water through fingers. Ryan had moved up in the department, made lieutenant, and had a corner office with his name on the door. The case that put Devon Mitchell away had become just another file in a cabinet full of them. Life moved forward the way it always does, one day bleeding into the next. But something had changed in Ryan over those 6 years. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was the weight of seeing too much. The job that once filled him with purpose now felt heavy in a different way. He'd started noticing things he used to overlook. The way some arrests seemed too easy. The way evidence sometimes fit together a little too neatly. The way his own certainty, that gut instinct he'd always trusted, sometimes felt less like wisdom and more like stubbornness. He'd stopped sleeping as well. Started seeing a therapist, though he told his colleagues it was just for stress management. The therapist asked him questions that made him uncomfortable. Questions about doubt. About the cases that haunted him. About whether justice and conviction were always the same thing. Then came a Tuesday morning that felt like any other. Ryan walked into the precinct with his coffee, now with less sugar than he used to take, and found his team gathered around a computer screen. They were watching surveillance footage from a liquor store robbery that happened 3 nights earlier. The similarities hit Ryan immediately, even before anyone said anything. The way the suspect moved, the methodical approach, the same type of store, same general neighborhood, same MO, armed robbery, handgun, quick in and out, minimal violence but enough threat to make it serious. But this time, the surveillance footage was crystal clear. The store had upgraded their security system after a break-in last year, and the cameras were top of the line. High definition. Good lighting. Multiple angles. You could see everything. Ryan watched the footage once, then asked them to play it again. His coffee went cold in his hand as he stood there staring at the screen. The suspect was a black male, late 20s, thin build, about 6 feet tall. There was something about the way he moved that triggered something deep in Ryan's memory, something familiar that he couldn't quite place. They caught the suspect 2 days later. His name was Troy Henderson, 28 years old with a record going back a decade. Armed robbery, assault, drug charges? a career criminal who'd spent more time inside than out. When they brought him in, he didn't even bother denying it. The evidence was overwhelming. During the interrogation, Troy was almost casual about it. He'd done this before. He knew the system. He sat there with his lawyer, occasionally smirking, treating the whole thing like it was just business. Ryan watched from behind the one-way glass, feeling that familiar anger at someone who hurt people without remorse. Then Troy said something that made Ryan's blood freeze. One of the detectives mentioned that the MO matched some other robberies in the area. Troy laughed and said, "Yeah, well, I've been hitting stores like that since I was 20. Got a system that works, since he was 20. 8 years ago." Ryan felt something crack open inside his chest. He left the observation room and went back to his office, closing the door behind him. His hands were shaking as he pulled up old case files on his computer. He typed in search terms, filtering for armed robberies, convenience stores, similar time frames. The case file that came up made his stomach drop. Devin Mitchell. 6 years ago. The corner store on 5th Street. Ryan pulled the physical file from archives that same afternoon. He spread everything across his desk as the sun went down outside his window. The grainy surveillance footage, the witness statements, the circumstantial evidence that had seemed so solid at the time. He watched the old footage again, this time with the new video of Troy Henderson playing side by side on 2 different screens. The height was the same. The build was nearly identical. The way they moved, that confident, methodical approach. Even the tilt of the head was similar. Ryan's chest felt tight. He told himself he was jumping to conclusions. 2 robberies with similar MOs didn't mean anything. Criminals copied each other all the time. But deep down, in that same place where his gut instincts used to live, he knew something was terribly wrong. He started digging, really digging, the way he should have 6 years ago. He pulled Troy's complete criminal history and mapped it against dates. Troy had been arrested for armed robbery 7 years ago, released on bail and skipped town before trial. He'd been in the wind for 2 years before getting picked up in another state. The dates meant he could have easily been in the city when Devin's store was robbed. Ryan found Troy's old cellmate from a stint in county jail. The man was hesitant to talk at first, suspicious of why a lieutenant would be asking about old cases. But Ryan pressed, and eventually the man admitted something that made Ryan feel physically sick. Troy used to brag about getting away with jobs. He specifically mentioned a convenience store hit where some kid took the fall for him, thought it was the funniest thing in the world. The words echoed in Ryan's head as he drove home that night. Some kid took the fall for him. Ryan couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, he was back at the precinct, going through everything again. He found the original witness statements and started making calls, even though it was the middle of the night. The anonymous caller who'd tipped them off about Devin, the number was disconnected, the name likely fake. He'd never verified it properly because it confirmed what he already believed. Mr. Patel, the store owner, had moved to another state. When Ryan finally reached him by phone the next day, the man barely remembered the incident. "I'm sorry, officer," he said. "I was hit on the head. Everything was fuzzy. I just remember you seemed very sure about the identification, so I thought I must be remembering right." Those words cut deep. You seemed very sure. Ryan had coached the witness not through lies but through his own certainty. He'd led Mr. Patel to the conclusion Ryan had already reached. Ryan tracked down the youth center where Devin claimed he'd been that night. It took 3 days to find someone who worked there 6 years ago, an older woman who remembered Devin well. "Such a sweet kid," she said. "Always there playing basketball. Trying to stay out of trouble." Ryan asked about the night of the robbery specifically. The woman went quiet for a moment, then said, "We had a tournament that night. Ran until past midnight. Devin was there. I remember because his team won and his mother came to pick him up after her shift ended. The sign-in sheet had been thrown away years ago," she explained. "They only kept records for 2 years before shredding them. Standard policy. If Ryan had checked earlier, really checked, the evidence would have been there. But he'd been too convinced to look for evidence that contradicted his theory." Ryan sat in his car outside the youth center and felt the full weight of what he'd done settling onto his shoulders. A 17-year-old kid had told him exactly where he'd been, had given names, times, specific details, and Ryan had dismissed all of it because it didn't fit the story he'd already written in his head. He thought about Devin, who would be 23 now. 6 years in prison, 6 years of his life gone, 6 years of becoming someone different than who he would have been. All because Ryan had been so sure, so confident, so certain that his instincts couldn't be wrong. Ryan pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long time. He needed to do something, but what? Admitting this mistake wouldn't just hurt him. It would destroy his career, his reputation, everything he'd built. His captain would be furious. The department would face lawsuits. Other cases he'd worked might be questioned, but there was a bigger truth sitting in front of him. One he couldn't ignore, no matter how much easier it would be to just close the file and walk away. An innocent person was in prison. An innocent kid had lost 6 years of his life because Ryan had been too arrogant to consider that he might be wrong. He started his car and drove back to the precinct. It was almost midnight, but he didn't care. He pulled every piece of evidence on Troy Henderson and compared it to Devon's case. He documented everything. Every similarity. Every mistake. Every piece of evidence he'd ignored or dismissed. By sunrise, Ryan had a stack of papers 3 inches thick. Proof that he'd put an innocent kid in prison. Proof that his perfect conviction record had been built, at least in part, on being absolutely certain when he should have been carefully doubtful. He sat there in his office as the sun came up, knowing that what he did next would change everything. Not just for Devon, but for himself. For his career. For every case he'd ever worked on. The easy thing would be to bury it. The right thing would destroy him. Ryan looked at his badge sitting on the desk next to the files. He'd been so proud of that badge once. Now it felt like it was burning a hole through the desk. He picked up the phone and called the district attorney's office. When someone answered, Ryan took a deep breath and said the words that would start the avalanche. "I need to report a wrongful conviction, and I'm the one who caused it." The district attorney's office didn't want to hear it at first. Ryan sat across from the assistant DA, a woman named Patricia Chen who'd prosecuted dozens of cases with him over the years. She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You're telling me you want to reopen a case from 6 years ago? A case with a guilty verdict? Do you understand what you're asking, Ryan?" Ryan pushed the stack of documents across her desk. His hands were steadier than he expected. Maybe because once you decide to jump off a cliff, the falling part is almost a relief. "I'm not asking," he said quietly. "I'm telling you I convicted an innocent person, and I have proof." Patricia spent 3 hours going through everything. Ryan sat there and watched her face change as she read. The skepticism faded first, replaced by concern, then something that looked like anger, and finally a kind of weary resignation. When she finished, she took off her reading glasses and rubbed her eyes. "This is going to be a nightmare," she said. "You know that, right?" "For all of us," Ryan nodded. He knew. He'd spent the entire night thinking about nothing else. The review process started officially 2 days later, but it moved like concrete trying to flow uphill. The system wasn't designed to admit its own mistakes easily. There were procedures, protocols, chains of command to navigate. Every step required someone to sign off, to risk their own reputation by agreeing that yes, they'd all gotten it wrong. Ryan's captain called him into his office that same week. Captain Rodriguez was a man who'd worked his way up from patrol officer over 30 years. He'd seen everything, or so he thought. "What the hell are you doing, Cole?" Rodriguez's voice was quiet, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been yelling. "You're torching your own career." "And for what?" "For the truth," Ryan said. "For doing what's right." Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. "You think the truth matters more than the system? You think admitting we got it wrong helps anyone? It opens up every case you've ever worked. Every conviction. Defense attorneys are going to have a field day." "I know. Then why?" Ryan thought about that question. He'd been asking himself the same thing during every sleepless night. Because a kid is sitting in prison for something he didn't do. And I put him there. If that doesn't matter more than my career or the department's reputation, then what are we even doing here? Rodriguez didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but he didn't want to say it out loud. The word spread through the department fast. Ryan could feel it in the way conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. The way some officers wouldn't meet his eyes. A few of his colleagues were supportive, quietly telling him he was doing the right thing. But most saw him as a traitor, someone who'd broken the unwritten code that you protect your own, you protect the badge. You never admit weakness to the outside world. Ryan stopped going to the usual bar where the cops hung out after shift. He ate lunch alone at his desk. At home, his phone stayed mostly silent except for calls from lawyers and investigators working the review. 3 months into the process, Patricia called him. "We've got enough for a hearing," she said. The judge agreed to review the case. "It's not a guarantee of anything, but it's a start." Ryan should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the weight pressing down even harder, because now came the part he'd been dreading most. He was going to have to face Devin. The prison was a 2-hour drive from the city. Ryan had never visited anyone at Riverside Correctional before, though he'd sent plenty of people there. The building was gray concrete and razor wire, the kind of place that looked exactly like what it was. A place where hope went to die. The visiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and something else Ryan couldn't identify. Desperation, maybe. He sat at one of the metal tables, his palms sweating, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. When Devin walked in, Ryan barely recognized him. The scared 17-year-old was gone. In his place was a man who'd learned to survive in a place that breaks people. Devin was bigger now, muscular in the way you get from prison yard workouts and nothing else to do. His face was harder. He had a scar above his left eye and a tattoo on his neck that Ryan couldn't quite make out. But it was Devin's eyes that hit Ryan the hardest. They were cold. Empty. The eyes of someone who'd had to shut down everything soft inside him just to make it through each day. Devin sat down across from Ryan and didn't say anything for a long moment. Just stared. Ryan forced himself not to look away, even though every instinct told him to. "So you remember me?" Devin finally said. His voice was different too. Deeper, flat. "Yes," Ryan said. "I remember everything." "Good, because I remember you too. I remember every single thing you said to me in that interrogation room. Every question. Every time you called me a liar when I was telling you the truth." Ryan's throat felt tight. "Devin, I need to tell you something. I need you to know that you made a mistake?" Devin's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you came here to say? That you're sorry? That it was all just a big misunderstanding?" "No," Ryan shook his head. "There's no excuse. I failed you. I was supposed to find the truth, and instead I just looked for evidence to support what I already believed. I took a scared kid and I pushed and pushed until a jury convicted you, and I was wrong." Devin's jaw clenched. For a second, Ryan thought he might attack him right there. Part of Ryan almost wished he would. "It would be easier than this." "Wrong," Devin repeated. 6 years of my life. 6 years. Do you know what happens in here? Do you have any idea?" "No," Ryan admitted. "I don't. My first week, I got jumped by 3 guys. They wanted to test the new kid. I had to fight just to earn the right to not get beat down every single day. I learned how to hurt people, how to make my face show nothing, how to sleep with one eye open." Devin leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "I missed my high school graduation. I was supposed to go to community college. I wanted to study computer science, you know that? I was good with computers. Had a teacher who said I had real talent." Ryan felt something breaking inside his chest. He'd known the facts, had read them in the files. But hearing Devin say it, seeing the life that had been stolen laid out in front of him was different. "My mom worked herself to death trying to pay for lawyers," Devin continued. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She'd come visit me here every week, and I could see her getting sicker, more tired. The stress was killing her. "I know," Ryan said quietly. "I read that she passed. I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Devin's voice rose for the first time. "She died thinking her son was in prison. Died believing that maybe some part of what they said about me was true, even though she tried not to. That's what killed her more than anything. The doubt, the shame, the looks from neighbors who thought she'd raised a criminal." Ryan felt tears burning in his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. He didn't deserve the relief of hiding. "She never got to see me walk out of here a free man," Devin said. "She died while I was locked up for something I didn't do. And you took that from both of us." "I know," Ryan said. "And I can't fix that. I can't bring her back. I can't give you those years. But I can tell you that I've found the real person who robbed that store. His name is Troy Henderson. He's admitted to doing dozens of robberies, including yours. I've documented everything. I'm working with the DA's office to get you out." Devin stared at him for a long moment. "Why now? Why after 6 years?" "Because I finally saw it. I finally looked at the case without my ego in the way. And I realized what I'd done. That's it. Your conscience started bothering you. So now you're the hero who's going to fix everything." "No," Ryan said firmly. "I'm not a hero. I'm the villain in your story. I'm the reason you're here. But I'm trying to do the one thing I can do, which is get you out and make sure everyone knows the truth. Devin was quiet for a while. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but somehow more painful. Do you know what 6 years in a place like this does to a person? Even when I get out, if I get out, I'm not the same person who came in. That kid you convicted? He's dead. He died in here. And I don't know who I am anymore. Ryan wanted to say something, anything that might help. But there were no words, nothing that could make this better. I hope you can live with what you did, Devin said, standing up. Because I have to live with what you made me. Every single day for the rest of my life. The guard came over to take Devin back to his cell. Before he left, Devin turned back one more time. Get me out of here, he said. That's all I want from you. Get me out and then stay away from me forever. Ryan sat alone in the visiting room after Devin left, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. A guard eventually came and told him visiting hours were over. Ryan walked out into the parking lot, into the sunlight, able to leave whenever he wanted. Devin would go back to his cell. The drive home took forever. Ryan kept seeing Devin's face, kept hearing his voice. That kid you convicted? He's dead. He died in here. When Ryan got back to his apartment, he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He barely recognized the person staring back at him. That confidence he used to carry, that certainty that he was one of the good guys, was completely gone. He'd learned the truth. But Devin was right. Learning it 6 years too late didn't make him a hero. It just made him someone who'd finally opened his eyes to see the damage he'd caused. And the weight of that truth was going to crush him for the rest of his life. The hearing was scheduled for 8 months after Ryan first made the call to the DA's office. 8 more months that Devin sat in prison knowing he was innocent. 8 more months that ate at Ryan like acid. During those months, Ryan's life fell apart in slow motion. The department put him on administrative leave while the review continued. Officially, it was standard procedure. Unofficially, everyone knew they were distancing themselves from what was coming. The police union issued a statement saying Ryan's actions were premature and potentially damaging to ongoing law enforcement efforts. 3 officers Ryan had worked with for years stopped returning his calls. His partner of 5 years requested a transfer. The local news picked up the story. Decorated detective claims he wrongfully convicted teen, read one headline. The comment sections were brutal. Half the people called Ryan a traitor, who was throwing a fellow officer under the bus. The other half called him a corrupt cop who'd probably railroaded dozens of innocent people. Both sides felt like knives, but the second group hurt more because Ryan had started wondering if they were right. How many other cases had he worked with the same tunnel vision? How many times had he been so sure, so confident, that he'd stopped looking for the truth? He went through every case he'd ever closed, sitting in his apartment night after night reading files until his eyes burned. Most seemed solid. But there were a few, maybe 3 or 4, where doubt crept in now. Cases where the evidence was circumstantial, where the suspect matched a vague description, where Ryan's testimony had been the thing that tipped the scales. He flagged those cases and sent them to Patricia. She didn't thank him. The media attention got worse as the hearing date approached. A local reporter somehow got Ryan's cell number and called him at 3 in the morning. "How does it feel to know you destroyed an innocent person's life?" the reporter asked. Ryan hung up without answering, but the question stayed with him. How did it feel? Like drowning, like being buried alive, like standing in front of a mirror and not recognizing the person looking back. His therapist asked him if he'd thought about hurting himself. Ryan said no, which was mostly true. He hadn't thought about it seriously, but the idea floated around in the back of his mind like a dark cloud. Sometimes when he stood on his apartment balcony on the 7th floor looking down at the street, the thought was there. Brief, unwanted, but there. "I don't want to die," he told his therapist. "I just don't know how to live with this." "You do it one day at a time," she said, "and you keep doing the work to make it right." The week before the hearing, Ryan's ex-wife called. They'd been divorced for 3 years, the job having slowly killed their marriage the way it killed so many cop marriages. She'd heard about everything through mutual friends. "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you," she said, "for doing the right thing, even though it's costing you everything." Ryan almost broke down right there on the phone. "I don't feel like I'm doing the right thing. I feel like I'm paying a debt I can never repay." Maybe that's what doing the right thing feels like sometimes. she said softly. It's not supposed to feel good. It's just supposed to be right. After they hung up, Ryan sat in his dark apartment and thought about that. About how much easier it would have been to just bury what he'd found, to let Devon serve his time and never know the truth. Ryan's life would have continued unchanged. His career intact, his reputation solid, but Devon would still be in prison. And Ryan would still be the person who put him there. The day of the hearing finally came. The courthouse was packed. News cameras lined the steps outside. Ryan arrived early, wearing his best suit, feeling like he was walking to his own funeral. Devon's public defender was there, now working for a nonprofit that handled wrongful conviction cases. She'd done good work over the past months, building on what Ryan had started. She nodded at Ryan but didn't smile. He didn't expect her to. Patricia was there with her team. She looked exhausted. This case had taken a toll on her too. Admitting the prosecution got it wrong went against every instinct in her profession. Then Devon was brought in, wearing a prison jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him. He looked around the courtroom with that same hard expression Ryan remembered from their visit. When their eyes met, Devon's face showed nothing. No anger, no hope, just emptiness. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Ryan took the stand and laid out everything he'd found. Every mistake. Every piece of evidence he'd overlooked or dismissed. Every way his ego and certainty had blinded him to the truth. The prosecutor who'd originally worked Devon's case tried to argue that the conviction was still sound. That hindsight was 20/20. That the jury had seen all the evidence and made their decision. But even he seemed to know he was fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming. Troy Henderson had confessed to the crime. The timelines matched. The MO was identical, and Ryan's testimony about his own failures was damning. Devon's lawyer presented witnesses who'd seen Devon at the youth center that night. People who'd been too scared or uncertain to come forward 6 years ago, but who were willing to speak now. A youth center counselor who remembered that night clearly because Devon's team had won the basketball tournament. He was there until at least midnight, the counselor testified. I remember because I had to lock up and Devon's mother came to pick him up just as I was closing. She'd gotten off her shift at the hospital and came straight there. Ryan listened to every word of testimony, feeling like he was being hollowed out from the inside. Each piece of evidence that proved Devon's innocence was another reminder of how badly Ryan had failed. The judge, a woman named Helen Rodriguez who'd been on the bench for 20 years, listened to everything with an expression that gave nothing away. When the testimony concluded, she said she'd review everything and issue a ruling within 2 weeks. 2 more weeks. Ryan walked out of the courthouse past the cameras and reporters shouting questions. He didn't stop. Didn't make a statement. Just got in his car and drove. He ended up at a park on the edge of the city. The same park where he used to bring his dog before it died 2 years ago. He sat on a bench and watched families playing with their kids. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that the world could be torn apart by someone's arrogance and mistakes. His phone rang. It was Captain Rodriguez. I saw the hearing coverage, the captain said. How are you holding up? I'm not, Ryan answered honestly. There was silence on the line for a moment. For what it's worth, Ryan, what you're doing takes guts. More guts than I have, probably. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like the bare minimum of being a decent human being. Maybe. But a lot of people wouldn't even do the bare minimum. They'd cover their ass and move on. After the call ended, Ryan sat there until the sun started setting. He thought about Devon back in his cell, waiting to hear if he'd finally be free. Waiting to see if the system that had failed him would finally make it right. He thought about Devon's mother, who'd worked herself to death trying to save her son, who'd never know that Devon was innocent, who'd died carrying that pain and doubt. He thought about all the other people who might be sitting in cells right now, convicted by cops who were too sure, too convinced, too arrogant to consider they might be wrong. 10 days later, Ryan was in his apartment when his phone rang. It was Patricia. The judge issued her ruling, she said. Devon's conviction is overturned. All charges dismissed. The judge was pretty harsh in her opinion. She specifically called out the investigative failures. Ryan sat down heavily on his couch. When does he get out? Tomorrow morning. There's paperwork to process, but he'll walk out of Riverside by noon. Okay, Ryan said quietly. Okay, thank you for telling me. Ryan, the judge also recommended a full review of your other cases. The department is going to have to look at everything you've worked on for the past decade. He'd expected this. Known it was coming. I understand. I'm sorry, Patricia said, and she actually sounded like she meant it. Ryan spent that night sitting on his balcony watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Devin was spending his last night in prison. Tomorrow he'd walk out into the world free but changed forever. Free but without his mother. Free but carrying scars that would never fully heal. Ryan had gotten him out. But Devin was right. That didn't make Ryan a hero. It just made him someone who'd finally done what he should have done 6 years ago. The weight of that truth sat on Ryan's chest like a stone. And he knew with absolute certainty that it would never leave. This was his burden to carry for the rest of his life. Not the punishment he'd received from the department or the media or the public, but the knowledge of who he really was. A man who'd destroyed an innocent person's life because he was too proud to admit he might be wrong. Tomorrow Devin would be free. But Ryan would never escape what he'd done, and maybe that was exactly how it should be. Ryan stood in the back of the crowd outside Riverside Correctional Facility. The news cameras were set up at the front gates. Reporters jostled for position. A small group of people held signs supporting Devin. Someone had brought balloons. It felt wrong somehow. Like a celebration when there was nothing to celebrate. Devin was getting out, yes, but he'd already lost 6 years. His mother was gone. The life he should have had was erased. This wasn't a happy ending. It was just the end of one nightmare with no way of knowing what came next. Ryan stayed near the back, partially hidden behind a news van. He didn't belong here, he knew that. But he needed to see it. Needed to watch Devin walk out of that prison as a free man. It was the least he could do, even if Devin never knew he was there. The prison doors opened at exactly noon. Devin walked out wearing the same clothes he'd worn into prison 6 years ago. They didn't fit quite right anymore. He was bigger now, his shoulders broader from prison workouts, but it was his face that struck Ryan. Devin blinked in the bright sunlight like he'd forgotten what real daylight looked like. The small crowd erupted in cheers. Devin's public defender was there, hugging him. A few relatives Ryan didn't recognize came forward, but Ryan noticed what was missing. Devin's mother wasn't there to see her son walk free. That absence hung over everything like a shadow. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Devin said nothing, just let his lawyer handle it. She made a brief statement about justice delayed and the failures of the system. She talked about Devin's resilience and strength. She called for reforms to prevent this from happening to others. Devin stood silent through all of it, his face unreadable. Then he climbed into a waiting car and was gone. Ryan watched the taillights disappear and felt something inside him collapse completely. It was done. Devin was free. And Ryan's part in this was over, except it would never really be over. Not for either of them. The department held a meeting 3 days later. Ryan was officially terminated. They didn't call it that, of course. It was a mutual agreement to part ways with his full pension intact. The department wanted to avoid a lawsuit, and Ryan didn't have the energy to fight. He turned in his badge and gun without ceremony, just handed them across a desk to Captain Rodriguez, who couldn't quite meet his eyes. For what it's worth, Rodriguez said quietly, I think you did the right thing in the end. In the end, Ryan repeated. That's the problem, isn't it? I did the right thing in the end after I'd already done everything wrong. He cleaned out his desk that afternoon. 12 years of his life fit into 2 cardboard boxes. Awards, commendations, photos from cases solved. They all felt like lies now. Evidence of a person he thought he was but never really had been. The lawsuits came next. Devin filed a wrongful conviction suit against the city and the police department. Ryan wasn't personally named, but his actions were detailed in every filing. The local news covered it extensively. Ryan's face was on television, attached to phrases like investigative misconduct and rush to judgment. His phone number got leaked online. People called at all hours, some to threaten him, some to tell him he'd done the right thing by coming forward, some just to tell him he was a disgrace. He changed his number twice before finally just turning his phone off most of the time. Ryan's therapist suggested he might have PTSD. He laughed at that. I'm not the victim here, he said. I don't get to have trauma from something I caused. Guilt can be traumatic too, she said gently. What you're experiencing is real regardless of whose fault it is. But Ryan couldn't accept that. Accepting his own pain felt like minimizing Devin's. So he just carried it, let it weigh him down, let it become part of who he was now. 3 months after Devon's release, Ryan got a job offer from an organization called the Innocence Initiative. They worked on overturning wrongful convictions. They wanted Ryan to review cases, to use his experience as a detective to spot the same mistakes he'd made. "We need people who understand how these things happen," the director told him during the interview. "People who know what tunnel vision looks like from the inside." Ryan took the job. The pay was terrible compared to what he'd made as a lieutenant. The work was harder emotionally than anything he'd ever done. Every case file he reviewed was a reminder of what he'd done to Devon. Every innocent person still in prison was a reflection of his own failures. But it was something. A way to try to balance the scales even though he knew they could never be balanced. Not really. He worked cases in silence, methodically going through evidence, looking for the holes he'd once ignored. In his first year, he helped overturn 2 convictions. 2 people walked free because Ryan had learned, finally, to look at evidence without deciding the answer first. It didn't feel like redemption. It felt like paying interest on a debt he could never fully repay. Ryan never tried to contact Devon. He'd promised to stay away, and he kept that promise. But he followed Devon's story from a distance, through news articles and social media posts from Devon's relatives. Devon struggled at first. There were articles about his difficulty adjusting to life outside prison. He'd spent his early 20s in a cage, and the world had moved on without him.
Technology had changed.
His friends had moved on with their lives. He had no job history, no college degree, nothing but those 6 years in prison. But slowly, Devon started to rebuild. He got his GED while in prison, and now he enrolled in community college. The same college he'd planned to attend 6 years earlier. Ryan read an article about it and had to stop reading halfway through because the tears made the words blur. Devon gave an interview to a local magazine a year after his release. The reporter asked him about anger, about forgiveness, about how he coped with what had been taken from him. "I'm not the person I would have been," Devon said in the interview. "That person died in prison. I had to become someone harder, someone who could survive in there, and I can't go back to who I was before. That kid is gone forever." The reporter asked if he'd forgiven the detective who convicted him. Devon was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Forgiveness isn't something I think about. That detective has to live with what he did. That's his burden. My focus is on building whatever life I can with the time I have left. I already lost 6 years. I'm not going to lose any more thinking about the person who took them." Ryan read those words over and over. Devon hadn't forgiven him. But maybe more importantly, Devon had decided not to let Ryan's mistake define the rest of his life. He was moving forward, not because what happened was okay, but because staying stuck in the past meant Ryan would keep taking from him forever. There was something profound in that, something Ryan tried to learn from. 2 years after Devon's release, Ryan was reviewing a case file late at night in his small apartment. His phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "This is Ryan," he said. There was silence on the other end for a moment, then a voice he recognized immediately. "It's Devon." Ryan's heart stopped. His hand started shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. "Devon, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I'm calling because I wanted you to know something." Ryan waited, barely breathing. "I graduated," Devon said. "Got my associate degree in computer science. It's not much, but it's something. It's a start. That's incredible," Ryan said, his voice cracking. "I'm so proud of you." "I'm not telling you this because I want your pride," Devon said, his voice still hard. "I'm telling you because I want you to know that I'm not going to let what happened destroy the rest of my life. You took 6 years from me. You don't get to take any more." "I understand," Ryan whispered. "I hope you do," Devon said. "I hope you're using what happened to help other people. Because that's the only thing that makes any of this mean something." "I am," Ryan said. "Every day. I'm working for the Innocence Initiative. I've helped overturn 3 wrongful convictions so far." Devon was quiet for a moment. "Good, keep doing that." "Because that kid you convicted? He's gone. But maybe the person you are now can stop it from happening to someone else. That's what I'm trying to do." "Then do it," Devon said. "And don't call me. Don't try to be part of my life. Just do the work and live with what you did. That's all I want from you." "Okay," Ryan said. "Okay, and Devon, for what it's worth, I really am sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I'm sorry. I know you are, Devin said quietly. But sorry doesn't give me back those years. Sorry doesn't bring my mother back. So just do the work. That's the only apology that matters. The line went dead. Ryan sat there in his apartment, phone still pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face. Devin was right. Sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but the work was something. Helping other people, preventing other Devins from losing years of their lives, that was something real. Ryan looked at the case file spread across his desk. A 22-year-old woman who'd been in prison for 4 years for a crime that didn't match the evidence. He wiped his eyes and went back to work. He would carry what he'd done to Devin for the rest of his life. The weight would never get lighter. The guilt would never fade. He would never be able to look at himself in the mirror and feel like a good person again, but he could do the work. He could use what he'd learned from his worst mistake to help other people. He could spend the rest of his life trying to make sure no other detective made the same choices he had. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't peace, but it was something. And for Ryan Cole, something was all he had left. He worked through the night like he did most nights now, building a case for someone else's freedom, trying to balance scales that would never be balanced, living with a truth that shattered him every single day, and knowing that this was exactly what he deserved.